Hello and welcome to the 28th Annual Get Lit Festival. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit Programs, a nonprofit organization housed within Eastern Washington University. Our program is responsible for Get Lit, Washington State's longest-running annual literary festival. We host dozens of free and low-cost readings, craft classes, panel discussions, a full book fair, and more every April in downtown Spokane. This year, we're thrilled to be joined by Tessa Hulls, Willie Vlaughton, and Keitcha Kuipers, alongside 60 other talented writers from across our region and beyond. You can find a full schedule of all in-person and virtual events, along with information about all of our festival authors, by visiting our website, getlitfestival.org. Now I'd like to welcome Mackenzie Draper, GetLit's Assistant Coordinator, to introduce today's event.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome everyone to Making Myths, Building Community, How Local Fiction Connects. Today we'll be joined by the editors of Banana Slug Books to discuss their debut publication, Spokane Campfire Stories, a literary anthology, and hear them read selections from the book. Sometimes witty, sometimes lyrical, sometimes heartbreaking and tragic, the fiction collection shows every side of its hometown and how it connects us all. The Banana Slug editorial team of Aimee Brooks, Dylan Cooper, Morganne Elkis, and Katy Shedlock will explore their love for literature and how it has deepened their relationship to Spokane, illuminate the unique and fascinating aspects of our region, and discuss how one place can inspire many different stories. Now I'll hand it back to Kate to begin the introductions.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Aimee Brooks is a writer and visual artist living in Spokane, Washington. She holds an MFA in fiction from Eastern Washington University and serves as the editor-in-chief of Banana Slug Books. She is currently serving on Spokane's Arts Commission. Find her previously published and forthcoming work in the South Dakota Review, Eco Theo Review, Goat's Milk Magazine, and more. I'd also like to add that Aimee is our 2026 festival artist. We love the design that she created for us this year. You will be able to purchase t-shirts with Aimee's design starting this April. Thanks again, Aimee.
Dylan Cooper is a writer, teacher, and amateur birder from Providence, Rhode Island. They earned an MFA in fiction from Eastern Washington University and are an editor for Banana Slug Books. Their work observes landscapes and subcultures of New England and has been supported by the McCormick Writing Center, formerly Tin House, Community of Writers, and the Joseph Dever Fellowship. While working to finish their first novel, they have had poems published in Washington State Queer Poetry Anthology.
Katy Shedlock is an Episcopal priest, poet, and church planter in Spokane, Washington. A 2024 graduate of the MFA at EWU in poetry. As a student, she was poetry editor for Willow Springs Books and now enjoys being an editor for Banana Slug Books with her classmates from the program. Katy's poetry has appeared in the Inlander, G's Magazine, Rock and Sling, and Plain Songs Poetry Journal, as well as the anthologies I Sing the Salmon Home, Poems from Washington State, and We Are All God's Poems. Katy is a preacher, pastors the weirdest, most wonderful congregation in West Central, and is happiest talking about writing with people she loves.
And last but not least, Morganne Elkis is a painter and writer based in Midcoast, Maine. She holds a BFA in painting from Pratt Institute and an MFA in creative writing, fiction, from Eastern Washington University. She bridges the visual and literary arts wherever she can. In her work for Banana Slug Books with editing and book design, in her personal creative practice, and within her professional role as gallery editor and art book collection co-curator for Blue Raven Gallery. Morganne's painting has been exhibited throughout the East Coast and Europe, with work shown in Budapest, Brooklyn, and Glasgow. Her fiction has been supported by the Community of Writers, Quillisasket, and the Pitak Intrawitnayut Award. Now, without further ado, we'll turn things over to Aimee and the editors to begin today's event.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor to be here. A special shout out to Kate and Mackenzie for all the incredible work that they've done putting this festival together and organizing our event. Before we get started, I would like to share a little bit about Banana Slug Books. Banana Slug Books is a small, independent press seeking to uplift emerging and established voices, building a bridge between publishing experiences and community. We publish beautiful literary work rooted in character, place, and ecology, working collaboratively with writers so that both emerging writers and our press are mutually strengthened. So that is a little bit about our press. And without further ado, we can begin our discussion.
Yeah, so we're here today in part to discuss our first publication, Spokane Campfire Stories, which we released last August in 2025. So to kick off our discussion, I wanted to ask what makes a good campfire story?
I think there are so many different things that go into a campfire story, which is part of what was such a pleasure to work with in this book project. You have this really cool blending of oral storytelling tradition and also the literary tradition that we got to kind of navigate putting this together. But a good campfire story, I think, is something that lingers with you, that makes you look at the world around you a little bit differently, not necessarily spooky, but there's definitely traditions of some spooky elements there, but always grounded in place. And Spokane was the place that we were looking at in this book.
I think one of the things I learned from working on this project is that a good campfire story should be haunting. There might not be actual ghosts or monsters, although there are plenty of those in the stories across the collection. But I think all of these pieces, I was just a little bit haunted by all of them. Kind of the way that, like, after you've been out in the woods, the campfire smoke like stays in your clothes until you wash it. And I think the other thing is that like we tell certain stories because we're in certain places, right? Because we're at that lake or because we're at that campground. And so there was a lot of, I might call it like hyper locality also in this book that was really fun. Um, and the other thing that came up that I wasn't expecting that I also really enjoyed were some really interesting, maybe even searing examinations of the phenomenon of we have a lot of people who live outside in the middle of our city, right? So camping, urban camping, became a part of the book too, in a way that I wasn't expecting, but that I really, really appreciated in terms of giving a holistic picture of our region.
I think as we are thinking about the oral storytelling tradition of campfire stories, and then our literary parallel to that, campfire stories for all of time have been incredibly honest. Ways to provide information to different groups of people, maybe to youth, maybe to newcomers to new lands. This is how you will navigate the woods. This is how you're going to survive out here. And so I think I've seen that raw honesty in all of the stories that are within this collection in really incredible ways. And I think that that's a thread that ties them together really nicely. Something else that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that there are not really many medium-sized fires. We have fires that are really controlled within a specific context. We have candles, we have campfires, we have matches. All of those things are in a very specific context. And then we have these really big explosive fires. And I feel like a lot of our stories can fall into one of those two categories. We do have these like really tight, really neat, controlled stories. And then we do have these like bigger, more explosive stories as well. And they complement each other really well.
Yeah, I was thinking about how like Spokane and the inland Northwest region in general was such a um interesting and spooky in a way, like place to base a collection of campfire stories. Because there are campfire stories that take place in any region. But it feels kind of like it's in the air here, like that there's a smoke season and wildfires being the kind of natural disaster that people talk about here. It felt there was a lot of connection between doing a collection of campfire stories and then the stories we were getting that literally had to do with fire and smoke and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I also was really interested in that coming from the East Coast. I had never been in wildfire territory before in my life. And the day I stepped off the plane, it was summer and it was just the smoke was crazy thick in the air and it is extremely striking. And it's been really cool to see just the ways that it shows up in all of these different stories. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily like the major thematic element of any one particular story, but it's kind of like in the air, so to speak, no pun intended, in all of the works, which is a cool connective tissue throughout the book and feels so rooted in place in the specific Northwest, like Dylan was saying.
Should we hear some examples?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Should I start?
Go for it.
Go for it.
We chose some selections to read for you that hopefully will give you a sense of what we were talking about here, as well as kind of the multifaceted expansiveness of the collection that we ended up putting together. So this is a segment from There by Elizabeth Graves. William Henry Stanley considered his wife a sad woman. He liked sad women. He liked, mostly, how it was so easy to comfort them with a simple there. In fact, Willie couldn't remember the last time he'd said anything to his wife other than that two-word phrase. This, Willie concluded, as he watched his wife make her way down to the lake's edge, hike up her stockings and wade into the water, was a sign of an excellent marriage. All their relationship required was one common word said twice. From his window on the second story of Cliff House, Willie could see it all, the basalt walls across the lake that mirrored the one Cliff House perched atop of, browns and rainbows rising for a fly, and perhaps even the wind as it tugged whitecaps up from the lake. However, there were two things Willie could not see, the first of which was Rock Lake's future, which would bring with it train crashes, deaths and drownings, and a catastrophic flood that would destroy the town. And the second was the monster rumored to live in the lake. Though it was possible Willie was looking right at the monster that very moment, but just couldn't see it through the murk.
I love how this piece is so tactile and immersive, and also so incredibly funny.
Yeah, funny and spooky both. And I think that was a really strong element we were looking for in putting this in this anthology together, was like something based in reality and yeah, that kind of really direct, immediate storytelling way, and this mythology about a place. And I feel like that story really highlighted that.
Yeah, I remember reading this one and being like, I need to go find this lake, right? I need to go see for myself.
Well, I have a piece that's also about lakes as we're talking about it, that I think has some similar qualities to it, that immediacy of place. But I'm going to read from Isabel Eastman's The Crown Lake King. And I'm just going to read from the very start of it because I think that is, I really enjoy the way that she sets the stage for you. So, The Crown Lake King by Isabel Eastman. Before Caleb came to camp, we called the lake by its name on the map and spent 6 weeks hiking circles through the pine forest, playing ping pong on rotted outdoor tables, and trying to keep sand out of warm turkey sandwiches as we ate lunch on the shore. If we had known any other kind of summer, we might have called this one boring. The Monday that Caleb arrived, 14 years old and half a foot taller than the rest of us, he dug his black sneakers into the sand and pointed with a Sharpie-stained finger at the way the trees spiked out in a ring along the edge of the lake. Shit's a crown, he declared, and we all nodded back. From where I stood, I could see the acne purpling the back of Caleb's neck, threatening his hairline the same way it did my older brother's. My brother called camp a cult, but Caleb called it bullshit. That morning, he stepped out of his mom's sedan with a round-shouldered slouch, just as our counselors gathered all the boys around the flagpole. We had hoped that since the wildfire smoke had worsened overnight, the counselors would let us spend the day inside the camp offices, but the directors were determined to keep us in our routine as the fire kept its distance. The air made our eyes sting, and a couple of the boys with asthma hadn't slept, their wheezing keeping us all awake too. Bullshit. And I really love how this piece just kind of dives straight into putting you in a place, both physically and temporally. And I think that's a really strong element of a campfire story, is not just that physical setting, but like the mood that it's evoking for you. Like we can tell that there's something going on like this arrival of Caleb is going to change things for all the boys at the summer camp really in a significant way. So there's kind of that promise too of like a change for an entire population of people. And in literary stories, that can happen as well. But I think a lot of times it's more around one character's internal change. And so I really enjoy that this has both elements in Crown Lake. So
I think
That
that
line about the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Aimee.
no, you're good.
That line about the sand in the turkey sandwiches is just like every childhood summer camp camping trip where you're by water. You love being by the water. The water is so good. And why is the sand everywhere? It just details like that. So much fun.
super nostalgic.
Delicious sand. I think that the immediacy of having young protagonists too, I feel like is such a good vehicle for a story like this. It captures such a perfect moment in time. And I also think that these really big ecological events can make people feel like children again when things do feel really out of control. I think the feelings that these young teens are having are feelings that felt really similar to me whenever I was in Spokane experiencing my first fire season. And then even whenever I was living in other parts of the United States experiencing other weather events as well, like tornadoes too. I think that they do have this incredible ability to make people feel really small. But then coupled with this context where like these kids like want to demonstrate their power too. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I remember when we were um, figuring out how to arrange this collection. And yeah, we thought about the order for a long time. And I remember wanting to put initially, this was my personal what I brought in was I remember wanting to put that story and Elizabeth's story, which I just read, next to each other because like the um, having conversation between them. And I'm glad we split them up because I think that they capture a similar feeling. And so having them kind of bookending this anthology, I think ended up working really well. But what I also love about this piece is I don't think we ever get like a pinpointed location. Like, where is this? Is this outside Spokane? Is this, further inland? And yet you can really feel what region you're in those really immediate details. The yellow sky and the hawks and the marmot, of course. Yeah, it just feels really visceral and close, even if you don't know exactly where you are.
I think that's kind of similar to There as well. And maybe partly why it's nice that we split them up, but why it's really fun to hear them next to each other right now. There has this like lake monster element, which again is something that feels so immediate and so real, but so fantastical at the same time. So um, it's really cool to see how different authors have kind of interpreted what a campfire story means and what level of like quote unquote reality they're interested in engaging with.
We have a lot of good creatures in this collection. Imaginary, maybe, and real. And I am gonna read from Chris Dennison's The Monkey Room. Monkeys are a particularly terrifying creature. And so I think that this selection feels very spooky for me. But I chose a section from the middle and it follows newlyweds Charlie and Sarah. They're at the Silman Hotel, which is in the past, according to the story, a lesser version than the Davenport. But they had real monkeys there in the past, which is wild. And I learned about it via this story, and it has stuck with me. She had been enchanted as they passed the monkey cage on the way into the lounge to find them nibbling on oranges and watermelon, the two of them with their arms across each other's shoulders like they were old pals sharing a joke. The monkey room itself was reminiscent of a tropical paradise. The walls were lined with bamboo mats, while fake palm fronds arched above them. Everywhere there were silk flowers, orchids, and birds of paradise, and brightly colored hibiscus bloomed around the room, and tiki torches lit the corners with flickering light. Sarah couldn't hide her disappointment when the waiter led them to a table across the room, too far from the monkey cage to watch over them. Charlie shivered as they sat down. I'm glad we're sitting over here. I don't like those things. They scare me.
This is such a fun story. um, I'm also so captivated by the research that goes into pieces like this one. I had no idea there were monkeys that were actually in Spokane held in a hotel, which is a really interesting piece of the city's history, I think. But yeah, a really fun, playful one. I'm glad you read from it, Aimee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I remember.
setting is just like, I'm just like, oh, so tacky, so cringe. And like, and the fact that this is a honeymooning couple, they're like excited to be there. And just what that says about that era in time, that this hotel was like, yes, this is the winning formula. All the people will want to be here for the fake flowers and the live monkeys. And I don't know that we get an exact year for this story. As I read it, I always pictured like 1950s, 1960s. But yeah, just sort of what that aspect of what that hotel is doing sort of communicates about the moment in time that the city was in, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I remember getting this story and being shocked to learn that this was a real establishment because it felt so, I don't know, just unbelievable, I guess. And like, yeah, unsettling in a way, but it's still a really fun story. And yeah, I was interested in what what Aimee was just saying about having such a, you know, so many non-human creatures or life forms in these stories. Like we've got lake monsters, we've got marmots, we've got Bigfoot. Um, and yeah, just the relationship between, sorry, excuse me, between the human and not human. And like we've talked as a press that like the human element of a story is something we're really looking for, like make that human experience and human touch feel really close and immediate to us. And how many writers are doing that through engaging with non-human elements, fantastical, you know, stories like this that were real creatures in kind of this otherworldly situation. That kind of blending of reality and fiction, that kind of confuses your senses a little bit, is something I really love about how this anthology turned out.
I think that's also part of a campfire story, right? Is that like we go out
Yeah,
to the woods and then we are in close proximity to the wild things, right? Or we go to the hotel, the cheesy hotel bar, and we are in close proximity to the wild things and all the dramatic possibilities that involves.
Yeah, like a combination of artifice, like domesticated real life, put right there in conversation with the wild and these things that are so out of your control. It's a really interesting tension that I hadn't thought of it that way, Katie. I love that. That is what a campfire story is.
yeah, suddenly anything can be real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so cool to spend time in a place like this where these animals become this vehicle for talking about this couple's relationship and like the direct quality and health of their brand new marriage. And like we have the opportunity to say a lot about the ways that animals are treated or the way that the environment is treated, even through this completely artificial rainforest cafe-esque space that's happening in the past. That in conversation with other pieces that are taking place with very real, tangible, non-plastic nature creates a really cool dynamic.
Well, I'm going to read from While You're Twisting, I'm Still Breathing by Lena Koivula. For a little bit of context, this is a couple, two people who are in a car together, and the narrator is asking his partner to talk to him about a particular place that is full of local history, and that just leaps off the page. "Tell me about People's Park," I said. At the bonfire, his sister claimed this was the place their parents met, back when the park was a campground. I'd dipped into gloom over not knowing this bit of lore, his literal origin story. I backed away from the flames into the cool shadows at the edge of the fire pit, opened another beer. So, during Expo 74, the Yippies, I hate that word, the Youth International Party, set up a campground for quote unquote transient youth. He moved to rub his eye and stopped himself. It had been a campground before, from the early days of car travel through maybe the 50s. My grandparents stopped there in a trailer when they were first married at the end of World War II. That's how my family ended up in Spokane. No one left until me. My dad was born way later. He's the youngest, an accident, right? A bad apple, but his parents were too tired to give a shit. They couldn't punish him or anything. He embarrassed them with his long hair. The two of us, black sheep, in long lineages of black sheep, dating back to the Mayflower, young men heading farther west with each generation. We'd moved to Bellingham after he graduated from Eastern Washington University. The two of us, trans men, ending our retrospective bloodlines in the corner of the continental United States as far northwest as we could go. He scratched his arms through his shirt, then sat on his hands. Dad was only 15 the summer of Expo. They had better weed in People's Park than he could get from the usual guys. His buddies are pussies. They drive, but send him into the park alone. It's like a revelation, right? This whole other way he could be living. Everyone's naked. Everyone's tripping. The gal at the information booth, they had an information booth. There were 5,000 people camping. I can't picture 5,000 people. Can you? The gal at the information booth was my mom, obviously. "Are you cool?" I asked him. "Your breathing is..." "Yeah, I just love this story. My parents loved each other." And then it goes on from there. But what I love is that growing up in Spokane, People's Park always had a very negative connotation. I think in a lot of ways it still does have a negative connotation. I work in a neighborhood that we serve a lot of folks who are living outside, and People's Park is a place where they live, right? And so it's kind of this wild, still kind of liminal space within the city limits, just down from the falls. And I think what I love about this is that this author is telling us a love story, set across the generations and set in this place and in this community, that I had never been given this particular window into what happened there. And so that was, and I assume there were lots of literal campfires. I think there are still lots of literal campfires at People's Park. But thinking about how that was a place where people discovered who they are and made a life together, was really kind of a reclamation for me of that space. And I think about People's Park differently now, when I happen to drive by, and or like when I hear my homeless neighbors talking about camping there. Now I have these connotations from this story, and not just the purely negative connotations that I had had before.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how we got to learn so much about the city where you guys live and I used to live, through this project. And also, like Katie, I love this story on a like more formal level too, as a campfire story example, because it is a story within a story. There's this oral story that's being told like partner to partner about the history, and then there's also the top action and what's going on where they're driving around trying, like there's an allergic reaction going on, and we're trying to like navigate that while getting this whole story about like um, a love story from long ago. And I think that's a really cool way of interpreting campfire story as well. And we have a couple other pieces in the book like that that are more really heavy on dialogue. I'm thinking of Greg Spatz's story and Polly Buckingham's story. But it just is, yeah, really cool to have that kind of structure and framework and to get that multi-level and generational thing going on.
Yeah, this
There's a
story is
lot.
like a master class in like distilling history into a fictional short story.
Yeah, I think that there are so many qualities here that are shared with ancient texts in some really interesting ways, like talking about even like the protagonist's family's first landing via the Mayflower and his lineage of being black sheep and the way that this is told all still feeling so engaging. I think sometimes hearing somebody's full lineage is can like I don't know feel too far removed, but this makes it feel so tangible, so close to the touch. And I feel like I care about the parents in these story, especially in this moment. It slows down time in a way where I care so much about these people at People's Park.
Aimee, do you want to tell us about how this project came to be and kind of about the formation of the press? Because you have been the person to scoop us all up and carry us forward.
Yeah, for sure. So in the summer of 2024, I just graduated from the MFA along with Dylan and Katy, leaving Morgan behind for one more year of MFA. And I had been working with the City of Spokane Parks and Rec Department all the way through the MFA. I needed a job. I'm writing a camp novel. I was doing on-the-job research. They're fully aware of my research, don't worry. And I was like, how can I combine a lot of things that I'm really interested in? And through Spokane Arts Saga grants, they provide a really accessible way for artists who are interested in completing a medium to large scale project to have access to the funds to make those projects happen. Um, I had worked on the press at in the MFA, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I was like, okay, I have built up all of these incredible skills in the MFA. Those skills, if you're not using them, kind of like learning a language, tend to feel like they drift away a little bit because they are skills that are used in such a specific context. So I wanted to make sure I was not losing those skills. So I applied for the grant. I got the grant. I rallied the people. My rubric for my people. I obviously have worked with all of them before. We'll speak to that in a second. But I was like, who would I want to go on vacation with? Which means lots of logistics, lots of planning. A potentially, your car keys could fall into the ocean at any moment. And then who are the people you want to be stranded with? And so that is how I chose my people. But I worked with all of them before, so if you all would like to speak to those experiences, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Aimee is a force of nature, first of all. I think that we'd be really messing up if we're not acknowledging that. But um, Aimee kind of had this project, the Campfire Stories anthology, like in your mind, and then you, yeah, rallied us all together. And um, I remember you applying for the grant. I think, were you in my house? Yeah, you were we were together and you're like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm applying for this grant. And it was kind of like this big moment of like, what do you do next after an MFA? Like, how do we continue to have, like you were saying, like really strong literary connections, move forward in a professional sphere? Aimee, Katy, and I had all worked together on Willow Springs Books, which is the university publishing house at Eastern, and Dylan had worked for the magazine. So we'd all had some publishing experience and all been kind of interested in it and have a lot of different skills, which I think makes the team more successful than if we all were like super hyper focused on like, God, I don't know, like one small aspect. Like if we were all as good proofreaders as Dylan, I think we would have really beautiful and perfect books. But maybe some of the things, like Katy is amazing at event planning. So we might just be total introverts and never actually be going anywhere to promote the book, which is really important to the community element of it. But yeah, it was really cool to see this all come together and how we can all complement each other.
One of the things that Jonathan Johnson says in when people are like, but why should I do an MFA? And I think he has come up with really good answers to that question, because I think um, for poetry students in particular, it's like, well, I'm never going to make any money on what I might write, right? So like, what's the value of taking this time out of my life for this study? And one of the ways that he answers that question that has always stuck with me is so that you can find your writing friends, and find the people who will continue to journey with you on your literary life. And what I have kind of reflected on the fact that so we were all classmates, but I was never actually in workshop with anybody else in Banana Slugs, because I was doing poetry and you were all doing fiction. But that internship space, especially working on Willow Springs books with Morgan and Aimee, and we had in particular a couple of projects that were stressful to bring to production, but it was like, okay, if we can produce a book under some stressful circumstances, then surely we can have a lot of fun together, making the books that we just want to put out into the world. And so yeah, so it's kind of funny. I feel like maybe you might find your writing friends outside of workshop, even in the program, which has turned out to be a great thing.
Yeah, I feel like Aimee put together a very well-rounded group, like kind of what Morgan was saying. If I feel like if we didn't have any one of the people here, we would have a big logistical chunk missing of like what it actually takes to bring a book to life. But yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about working on this press and like working with this group in particular is like seeing the ways that you can kind of do what you want. Like, I feel like I don't know, it's easy to have in your head like here's the traditional like path that I should take as a writer. Like I'm gonna learn how to write in this, um, I don't know, whatever style of writing, and I'm gonna publish in these journals, and I'm gonna try to do it, just kind of, move up the ladder that way. And I feel like this project being so, so based on our passions and what we want to do, and also so rooted in our community, just kind of opened my eyes to a different way of doing it, and like finding what is interesting and compelling for you to do, and like where do you feel aligned with the work that you're doing. Um, and that's what you should be doing. And I feel like that's been really meaningful and cool, and is, yeah, yielded some exciting results so far working with this team.
I feel like traditional publishing has been held in the hands of so many people who are operating in really specific ways, who look and sound and are certain ways. And as I think about the future of publishing, there are so many small presses that I feel really inspired by, community book projects that are happening in this town. And whenever I think about the projects that I want to be putting out into the world and the people that I want to be front facing for those projects and the authors that I want to represent, I feel so fulfilled in the team that has come together, the skill sets that everyone holds, the authors that are in our collection, and the types of people who have been drawn to our community. We've met so many cool people, around Spokane and beyond. And I feel so grateful for those people who are in our community now and people that I now consider friends that maybe I just didn't even know at the beginning of this book project. It feels so special.
I think joy has been such a huge part of this experience. Like, it's a lot of work to make a book, and it's a lot of work to do it on the timeline we did it, which was a pretty crunched timeline to finish within that year framework for the Saga grant, which we're very happy and grateful for having that grant because it allowed the book to be possible. But it still, there's stress involved without doubt. And like Katie said, we had worked in more stressful circumstances before, so we all knew we could do it and come out on top. But I think the joy that just permeated like every moment of the process is what stands out the most to me. Like those early conversations when we didn't yet really have stories rolling in and we were just kind of dreaming about what this might look like, down to like at Aimee's house, spending so much time, like Dylan alluded to, trying to figure out the order of this thing and do it really intentionally and really think about the way that each story feeds into it, the next. It was just fun. And I think that the stories we publish as a press, like we want them to have a resounding hell yeah. And we want the readers to join in the chorus of that. And just, I think that's so cool that we are just like, you know, four people that met because of a random MFA program, and we are able to elevate and uplift voices in our community around us and even beyond. That's really special. And I think that shouldn't be overlooked because you can do whatever you want to do. And especially if you have really cool, strong, smart people around you, like everything is possible. Not to be too sentimental, but
I also love that in a lot of ways, this project was not a natural fit for who I am as a writer. Um, but I really, really enjoyed getting to put on a different hat and think about like, okay, well, what are the stories that I want to help publish, even if those are not necessarily the things that I would sit down and naturally choose to write on my own. Um, and I think also then because I got excited about it, I was like, what the heck? I'll write a story, which ended up in the book. And so I think like I have had opportunity to grow outside my genre. And I think that like it's also been really helpful for me to think about like as we have started looking towards our next project, like what are the things that I want to exist in the world because I want to write them and I feel like I can and I should, and what are the things that I want to exist in the world because I want to publish them. And I think those are two different questions, or at least for me, that has become a helpful differentiating point. And I love the fact that I have the opportunity through the press to work on that publishing question, and not just the question of what do I want to exist in the world because I wrote it, but what do I want to exist in the world because we published it and we found that story, found that author, found that voice, and were able to put that work out into the world so that other people could enjoy and experience it.
There's so much joy in finding a good story. It's really
We've
exciting.
talked a Yes, I love that early on we were like, what are the hell yeahs? We'll make that pile first. And keeping that ethos throughout the project. We've talked a little bit about the fact that I am a Spokane born and raised person, and the three of you came for school. But just kind of about what working on this project that is so focused on place, how has that changed your relationships to this place, or what have you learned about Spokane from working on such a place-based project?
I feel like my experience of Spokane has historically been very like rooted in the physical. And so I feel like the places that I know very well are my neighborhood that I walk or bike through, downtown because I live so close to downtown, the river, People's Park. And so I feel like I'm experiencing those things in these really, really close to the surface ways, where I'm living them. But I think as this collection came to be, I realized, whoa, I do not know very much about the history of Spokane whatsoever. Or about history in general, but that might be another conversation. Um, and so sometimes it feels really difficult for me to picture the past without guiding literary texts that become so immersive. And so, because we did have so many of these phenomenal historical pieces, they really were. I learned my Spokane history through Spokane Campfire Stories, and I feel so grateful for that.
Yeah, I think about like Nat Park, Natatorium Park, or I think about Calvin's piece, um, and so many others. And I agree with Aimee 100%. It is like the history of this place that has been um, really compelling to learn about, and I do think helps to like color my understanding of Spokane. And I'm really grateful for this too, because I moved to Spokane, obviously, for the MFA. And then I've moved back east. I'm from Maine and I'm back in Maine now. And so while you're in the MFA, your experience is pretty like full on and immersive. Like there's not the most time to be exploring the place that you're living. And so I think that this book was a true gift and treasure for me, especially because like I didn't have a chance really. I didn't have the physical time to be exploring this intimately. And now I feel like I've been gifted like all of these like little tours from people's really intimate and personal and tangible corners of this city and this place, that I just would never have had otherwise. And so that's been, yeah, I don't know. I think seeing through other people's eyes and also just learning the literal history has been really informative for me.
Yeah, I feel like I've been trying to pinpoint um, some things that I've thought in relation to this question, and I'm thinking of, if we did a similar anthology from the place that I'm from, it would be so different. And like, I'm from New England, and yeah, when I think it just in my mind's eye, I think of just like the humidity and the full greenness, and I think about all these like stone walls in Massachusetts that are just all over the reforested land. Um, and coming out here from that landscape, I remember just being like, this is a landscape that I've never seen before, like how open it is, and how big the sky is, and of course it's so much drier. And I feel like this is where I have trouble explaining what I mean, but I feel like that landscape is kind of imbued in the book. Um, like I don't know, a New England anthology I could picture being a lot more watery. For lack of a better word. And like here is so much, it's smoky, it's crackly, for lack of more, I'm so sorry, descriptive words. But yeah, I'm really interested in this conversation about like place-based fiction. And like I'm thinking about that as like, I think connection to place shows up in so many ways in our creative work, like whether it's explicitly there or not. Um, Kind of like the concept of terroir in food. Um, yeah, your geography shows up in flavors based on environmental factors. And like how that happens in fiction as well, or just in writing and art. Um, but yeah, I think it's funny hearing place-based to me become kind of like a genre label. Yeah, partly because I think most work has a relationship to place, however, to whatever degree. But yeah, I'm remembering being in a writing class once, and someone was asking like, what makes a piece place-based, or like, is this place-based? And I was like, that's a funny way of thinking about it. And yeah, I think that's when I realized like I think I'm less interested in like, has this writer mined enough details or brought a place to life enough for it to be labeled as place-based, which I think many of our campfire stories do, because that's sort of what we ask them to do. Um, but I think I'm more interested in like how an artist's place, whether that's where they grew up or where they're living or a place that they are fascinated with, like how that locality becomes dissolved or distilled into their work, no matter if it's intentional or no matter if it's explicitly named, like kind of what writers pay attention to, because of where they live and travel. And so I think that was really interesting to me, like putting this collection together of writers who are from here and like know the place really intimately, and people who have lived here for a time and are kind of exploring it through that lens. Like, how is that kind of showing up in campfire stories? And that's kind of what is really interesting and exciting to me, especially as a transplant.
Yeah, I can't imagine how different it would be if this was a book based on New England. I think of New England as being, I think the stories would be not just watery, but also more private and closed. And I think that the stories in this are very open and inviting. And I don't know, there's something there. But Katie, what about for you as someone who is, as you say, from Spokane? How was the experience to be working on an anthology that is of your home?
Yeah, I think this project confirmed for me something that has kind of been a theme, which is that regional literature, maybe for lack of a better term, about the inland Northwest, um, has helped me love where I'm from, and love where I live, which I did not always. And especially growing up in Spokane in the 90s, as a young creative person, it was very much like, great, we will leave as soon as we can, right? Like because nothing interesting could possibly happen here. And I think part of that is probably just, I think everybody, especially when they're a teenager, hates on their hometown, right? I think that's part of like an adolescent way of going through the world. Um, I also think there was less happening creatively, artistically, 20 years ago than there is now. So I did what a lot of people who were interested in the arts did, who grew up in Spokane. I left. I went back east because that's where all of the cool things are. I went to college outside of New York City. I studied theater. And I think it was my junior year of college, I happened across a memoir called In the Wilderness by Kim Barnes, who I think might still be on the faculty at University of Idaho. And this memoir is about her life as a young woman in North Idaho. And it totally captivated me. And even though there are lots of details about her life growing up in North Idaho that were very different from my life growing up in Spokane, it was still that moment that I think a lot of writers have of like, oh, I didn't realize that my life could be fodder for literature until I read this other thing, where someone who has whatever characteristic that I didn't think was writing worthy is putting front and center. And that was the beginning of me really getting interested in regional literature and me sort of realizing like, oh, there's lots of great writing coming out of where I'm from, right? Especially because we have these amazing MFA programs like at EWU and U of I and University of Montana. And so I think what was so fun for me about this project is getting to see writers who were newer to the area also find things that they loved, that they wanted to write about. And I think um, being a part of that being a part of that creative community that tells the stories of a place and then helps people connect to that place. Because I think that's also kind of like, what does it mean to belong to a place? And being a part of that sort of ongoing stream has helped me continue to sort of, I guess, re reroot myself here, and to say like, no, actually, I'm really glad to be from Spokane. I'm really glad that for lots of different reasons, life brought me back here. In my adulthood, there's lots of great, interesting, creative things going on that I get to be a part of. And I think having writers who love a place and have that place show up in different ways is really important to, maybe I might call it like the spiritual health of a community. Speaking of regional literature, or place-based fiction, or whatever we want to call it, are there some books that maybe you all have read that have inspired your work on this book or inspired how you thought about this project?
As I was drafting the grant, I remember looking at Campfire Stories, Tales from America's National Parks very frequently. I think it's a really stunning book, and it's crafted by a lot of interesting people. So, members of different tribes, scholars, professors, geologists. So, it has a lot of people who are not from a particularly literary background who have come together to craft these stories. And so, they do feel very oral. The language is very, like, I guess, plain, for a lack of a better word. They're there to tell the story and get out. But that creates a really interesting collection. So I have looked to that. That's by Dave and Alyssa Caillou. And so they are like working on their third collection, I believe. It's all grant funded, and so it felt very inspirational to me. Um, some other honorable mentions that I really enjoy are Ruth Ozeki's All Over Creation. I remember reading it during the pandemic when I was still living in Texas, and it is set in northern Idaho in a fictional town. And I remember being totally enamored by this place where there's the potential of both militias and hippies and farming, and it was all so fast, and coming from like outsider perspective, all of it came together in such a nice way. And I think I did not even realize where this was set until I moved here. It was like, oh, I am living in the same geographic region as this book took place, and absolutely fell in love. And then Kim Fu, I'm a huge Kim Fu fan. She writes a lot of speculative fiction, but she is a Seattle-based author, and I love her works, Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century and The Lost Girls of Camp Forevermore. She's actually coming to Spokane the day of this very recording.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, there are a number of authors that come to mind. Marilyn Robinson's Housekeeping is based off Idaho. And yeah, I'm that just came to mind, and I'm thinking about just like the ways that that would both fit really well in kind of our Campfire Stories universe, and also is very different. Like, yeah, that one is a more watery, wet vibe. But yeah, very spooky and yeah, that was a book that I had read a couple of times before moving here, and I certainly read it differently once I was reading it in this area. Um, Garth Greenwell is another writer that I've been into lately, and his books take place in Bulgaria, but kind of, yeah, they interest me in the way that like this is there's a very strong sense of place and culture in these books without focusing on that in a way. You know, you've got stories that are taking place in classrooms or at protests, scenes that are just kind of imbibed with the spirit of the place, or like what was happening in this place while this narrator's here, I guess. And I'm thinking about Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson as well. Less for a regional lens, but as kind of that um, the heart of a campfire story that we're looking for. I feel like that book is the first thing that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking about um, literature that is blending reality and mythology, or like taking ancient Greek myth and telling it through a lens of contemporary culture, or telling it with a new perspective. Yeah, that book has so much to do with yeah, merging, blending between binaries, retelling old stories, making you see things in a different way. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the community aspect of this project and this press. I feel like that was always at the forefront of what we were trying to do. And so, yeah, I feel like reading can be a very solo activity sometimes. Um, but that feels very different from what we were trying to accomplish in Campfire Stories and in future projects as a press. So I wonder, like, what would you say the role of community is in what we've done so far and what we're doing in the future?
This is kind of funny, but I was just having a conversation with someone recently about growing up in the golden age of YA literature and how much fun I was having. Me and all my friends were reading all the books, we were having all the discussions, we were like so excited for the next thing to come out and to talk about these things, and reading really did feel so communal at that point in my life where it felt like everyone was on the same page. Everyone was kind of headed in the same direction as far as what they were reading, and everyone was excited to share. And I think I have not had an experience like that until Campfire Stories again, because everyone develops their own unique taste, as they probably should, and finds what they like to read. And I think it's joyous whenever you find people who have really similar taste, as I do with my other editors in this group, which is really nice. But it did feel like Spokane was reading Spokane Campfire Stories all at once. And so people were talking about it. We were building this community as these stories were emerging. Some of which, like, to drum up hype for the book, excitement, and create community before the book came out. But it felt so natural the way that things kind of transpired. People felt really excited to be there and to engage with the events that we had set out. And I feel like the momentum has continued since. And so I feel like we have a lot of community members that are really invested in what we're doing in the future too. And so that has felt so nice, and like people are anticipating what's next. That feels awesome.
I think, yeah, community is so important to us as a press, I think. Like, um, when I think back to like what Katie was saying about like what is it that I want to write, what needs to be in the world because I need to write it, and what needs to be in the world because I need to help it come to light and be seen and be known by many. Um, I think too about like, well, okay, so we're four people. Well, what can we do as a small press, as an indie press, a little differently? And I think community is an answer to that. And I think breaking down the walls to some degree of what publishing is, there's so much like mystery shrouded around publishing. And so much of that got lifted like when I joined the MFA and started working at a press, like, which is really cool. But even so, like, I think that being able to pull our community in, not just the writers, but the people that are reading the work too, and invite them in on the process. Like, we had a crafting campfire stories workshop with Pivot really early on, where we invited members of the community, partnered with Pivot, to come and just like try a campfire story, try telling a story in an oral storytelling tradition. Pivot led some little pointers for us, which was really fantastic. And then we kept going kind of with that. We had a print party where you could bring in your own clothes or whatever you had around, dish towel, tote bag, whatever. And like Aimee and I were printing block prints on it. And just, I think that goes back to the joy as well. So like the letting everybody in, being inclusive, like we're not trying to have like big barriers indoors like built up. We're not trying to like mythologize ourselves and make it the scary process. Like we really want to help voices be heard. Um, and also just have fun. Like the joy along the way is so important. And so yeah, I think community is one of the most important pieces, Dylan, to answer to the press.
I think creating community between emerging and established writers too was also really important for us with this project. We knew we wanted some established voices, and let's be honest, having some established voices in an anthology helps it sell, right? When someone is standing in the bookstore. We're super grateful that Jess Walter, gave us a nice blurb to put on the back, right? That kind of those things matter, right? And like having opportunities for people we had one person who I think she had never submitted anything ever before. And then we picked up her story, and then she was like, oh my God, I can do this, and has started submitting lots more stuff and really putting herself out there and getting things accepted, which is super exciting. And so creating that space where people who are new to getting their work published and people who have done it many times can be part of the same project. I think that creates community, and it just makes our entire literary scene stronger, right? Because it's people reaching across and saying, "Hey, like I hear you're in this book. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about it too." And talking to each other at the launch party and saying, "What else are you working on?" And um, even though we often imagine writing to be a solo activity, and in some ways it is, right? You at some point you have to put your butt in the chair and sit down and write. But I think the encouragement to keep sharing your writing happens best in a supportive community. And so because publishing can often feel alienating, and we all love to feel rejection when we put our stuff out there, finding ways to use the publishing process to build rather than break down community was something that was really important to us.
And partnering with other organizations too, like Pivot, Spokane Print and Publishing Center. It felt like this was a book that was not only for the literary community, which was really cool to me, that just kind of naturally started happening. Um, yeah, and I guess it sort of felt like, this book is always going to be for the community, and like, our community is, especially because it was so regional, like we did know a lot of the people who submitted. And it kind of felt like this is happening because of you. It's for the Spokane community, and like it's kind of building these ties between people in sort of different spaces of this community, which I think is what we hope will keep happening.
Yeah, it was like this little baby that we got to like send off to the world. Like it was like this way to say thank you to the community that we had. But then we're like, okay, off you go. And then we get to see like relationships forming through, oh, you're in this book, I'm in this book. Oh, I know someone who's here. Like it's so cool to be bridging all of those places, which I guess is kind of the nature of an anthology, but I also think it's really special about Spokane. Like it's a cool place, and it was such a pleasure to like just celebrate that through this book.
And I've been fortunate enough to have my work published in other anthologies that was just like, send in your thing. Okay, great. Look, you're on page, whatever, done. Right? And there wasn't that community building aspect of it at all. So,
And I feel like we
yeah.
get to have this. Oh no. I think there might be a lag on. I think that we are experiencing this really unique perspective as publishers when we are getting to hear all of this feedback about so many different writers' stories that are in the collection. It's been so interesting to hear from my family members, some of which are not like tr haven't traditionally been literary readers, or different community members who are, friends of mine who are interested in this collection. And so it feels like things are happening on these really big mi or macro levels, like the launch party where there were so many people there. I know our authors must have felt so incredibly loved in that moment, and I know that we did as a press. But then on these macro moments too, I had this really beautiful moment recently with the Parks Department where somebody from Spokane Parks and Rec was saying that he read the collection and he read the story Vodnik and was able to really connect with that story because of his Czech heritage too. So he was able to see himself in the story. And I was like, wow, like moments like that are what this is all about. We're helping facilitate these connections for people. And then we get to hear those stories, and that's so cool.
One of my favorite moments from the book launch, my partner was there just milling about in the crowd and was talking to some people, and they didn't know anything about the project. Like they'd heard about the project from, I don't remember how we promoted it, but somehow they heard about it, but they didn't know anyone that was published in it. They didn't have any tie to it other than Spokane. And like they had no idea that my partner was pretty knowledgeable about the project at that point. Um, and it was like so cool to hear him tell me later, like how excited they were, how happy they were it existed, and they didn't have any like skin in the game, so to speak. Like they didn't have a reason to, other than seeing representation of themselves and like their community and where they're from. And I think that's the coolest thing that we can be doing is, yeah, seeing and being seen is the best. It's a way of being loved, I think.
Oh yeah.
What are we going to do next?
I feel like Dylan should answer this question.
I guess I don't know if I should give too many details. Should we? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Well, at the time that we're recording this, hence our hesitation here, this we haven't publicly announced this, but by the time you're watching, we probably will have. Yeah, we are planning another literary anthology around the general theme of stories of transition. So we want to see all the different yeah, any compelling definition or idea or concept of transition. And we especially are excited about highlighting queer and trans and genderqueer voices, but we want to see those juxtaposed with yeah, just kind of the ways you see transition in both environmental and cultural life. So I think there's a lot of room for that project to be expansive. The other thing we are really excited about for this project is this will be a literary anthology interspersed with cyanotype prints, um, as kind of bringing together our literary and visual talents. Um, and yeah, those cyanotypes, we will encourage authors to press samples from the region that they are coming from or the region that they are writing. Bonus points for if whatever sample they're pressing has thematic or yeah, subject theme relevance to whatever piece of work that they're submitting to us. So we are very excited about this project. We have been having a lot of conversations about our hopes and what this could turn into. So yeah, I don't know if you guys want to talk about what you're excited for. That was my very on the spot disclosure of what we're doing. We will probably have a more eloquent announcement coming soon.
I'm so excited for this book. I think it's a really great second book after Spokane, which is so intimate around Spokane. Yeah, campfire stories around Spokane, and now we're looking more nationally. We're opening it up more, but kind of with that same attentiveness and like intimacy. I'm so excited. I know we all are so excited about a lot of different aspects of it, but I'm really excited about the design of this book, about that incorporation of cyanotypes and the fine arts and the literary arts and queer narratives and ecology and just how this and science and art and like how it's all going to get married up together. I think it's going to be really, really fun to get submissions in and to start curating them into a conversation. And yeah, just the physical design of the book is getting me giddy on the other side. So, yeah, what are you excited about, Katie?
I think I was thinking about how I think how people change is one of the most tender, fascinating things, right? Like it's why we love stories with interesting characters, right? And why characters that are compelling usually have some kind of change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Um, but I think also, especially in a time where I think there are so many factors in our society that are like, you should be rigid about everything, right? Like be in this box, and see the world in this way, and all of that polarization and splintering that we're all so sick and tired of. Like, finding ways to tell stories where like people still change, in the midst of all of the forces that work against our transformation. I think, I'm just really, really excited. I need those stories. I want those stories. I can't wait to read those stories. Um, and as a very not fine arts backgrounded person on this team, I'm also super excited for the integration with the visual arts. And I'm wondering if, since I didn't know what cyanotypes were until we started talking about this project, maybe if somebody wants to talk a little bit about like why cyanotypes and the history of that and kind of why that felt like such a good match for this project.
Ooh, I can talk about cyanotypes. I love cyanotypes. So they are one of the earliest forms of photography. And so they take iron compounds. And so there's two different iron solutions. You mix them with water, you mix them together. It creates like this neon yellow looking solution that you can brush onto paper, onto fabric. I've seen people brush onto wood to create furniture. That kind of the possibilities are endless. But because it's a photographic process, you expose the paper material, whatever, to the sun, and it turns all of the exposed parts blue, and anything that's covered up stays white or whatever the material is. So like the color of the paper, the color of the fabric, because it's blocking the light. So with things like leaves, petals, fabrics, whatever you lay over the top of the cyanotype, you can get this very nice variation. And so you can get some like layer and depth to it, and then you wash it out. And so that's what finally sets and solidifies the material all together. So this has been used to make blueprints, and that's what most people are going to think of. It's called Prussian blue, that color of the blueprint. But one of the earliest uses of cyanotypes was for scientific discovery, and it was. Sorry, there's cat feeders going off in the background. I'm gonna pause for just a second. Okay, great. Um, One of the earliest uses of cyanotype was for scientific discovery and preservation, and that was primarily led by a woman named Anna Atkins in the late 1800s, which is so interesting. She had a family history of science. And so her father was a scientist of various disciplines, and he thought it was really important to raise her in those subjects. And so she started out as an illustrator, but then as this became invented by a close family friend, she became this person who is really leading this realm of scientific discovery. So it's always been a vehicle for dispensing scientific information and getting information long distances away. She was primarily based in England, but because of her work, we're able to see algae from the English coast all over the world, especially at the time, was totally revolutionary. So I think as we're thinking about what this collection will be, I am thinking about how these stories of transition are going to be this really strong through line, and we're going to be looking for those same qualities of place in those stories. But we're also going to have this visual through line as well. So we're going to, get to read about all of these different places from far away to right here. And we will be able to see the visual representation in the same way that they would in the 1800s, which feels really cool.
And I think too, like the cyanotypes themselves are these transitional, like literally a transitional process, right? You've got like that like yellow color Amy's talking about, and then exposed to sun, it turns like purpley into like the blue. So there's a really literal aspect as well that's super exciting. And then I'm also thinking about like, I only very recently learned that cyanotypes are how they made blueprints, which like blew my mind. And I'm obsessed with this and I can't stop thinking about this. Um, and so I think it's also really cool because there's a lot of different ways cyanotype has been used throughout the history. And I think that's a very queer thing to be like using existing without one rigid definition or existing in different ways and using something in a different way than it's maybe like intended, socially constructed to be. So I think there's a lot of thematic ties for the cyanotypes, and I'm so excited to be creating them and working with the materials that we get and seeing where it leads us.
We're super excited.
Stay tuned.
Yes. So to leave you all with some gorgeous words from our collection, Campfire Stories, we've each chosen a page to read to send you all off. So if Katie wants to get us started with Natatorium Park.
So this is the end of Natatorium Park by Emily Gwynn. We mentioned earlier, but Natatorium Park was an amusement park that no longer exists. It was down on the far west end of West Central, down by the river. And it was a place where like miners and loggers and people could come like blow off steam and have some fun. And Emily gives us these beautiful prose poems where there's like snapshots of these different aspects of, it was called Nat Park, through time. And I'm going to read the one that is probably the most familiar because it still exists as a landmark. So this is the Louvre Carousel, which came to Riverfront Park for Expo 74 from Nat Park. But this is the Louvre Carousel, May 1954. It's the balsam of spring that guides you. The gentle white tufts early burst into lace-limbed branches of cottonwood. Can you hear it in the distance? Duke Ellington's piano is charming the stage as lines knot into clove hitches around the carousel. Climb aboard your favorite horse. Its mane a mess of curls and birds, soft elm of flank. Grip the fishnet harness and wait for the world to start spinning. Counterclockwise. Even this intricate engine relishes in reversal of time. Close your eyes just for a second. Listen. The organ pipes mimic your favorite song, backwards, its tempo transposed behind strained meter stuck inside looking glass. Each reflection, horse, 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 giraffe, horse, 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 tiger, is a calliope of brass pressed into rings.
That was great. This is from Kate Lebo's piece, A Mystery or a Problem or a Garden. The neighbors want to put a gazebo at the back of their yard, near our garage. Sounds fun, I say. For who, says Jordan, whose job it will be to build the thing. When my husband and I bought our house an almost decade ago, the first change we made was to tear down the rotting gazebo the owners before us had built at the back of our property. Every time I do something to make our yard a garden, smother the lawn, plant trees, whatever, I think about that gazebo and how anything we do to our house and land will be encountered by the next resident as a mystery or a problem. Their corrections to our corrections will be corrected until the house falls down. I try to find that comforting. Jamaica Kincaid writes in My Garden book that a garden dies with its gardener, because creating a garden is such an act of will, she writes, and because, if it is a success, it becomes a place of great beauty which the particular gardener had in mind. The gardener's death, or withdrawal of any kind, is the death of the garden. In a way, a garden is the most useless of creations, the most slippery of creations. It is not like a painting or a piece of sculpture. It won't accrue value as time goes on. Anything you think will be a problem, says my neighbor Ariana, as we consider the hump of soil I want to shape into a squash bed, will be a problem. I try to find that comforting too.
There are so many good gardens in Spokane. I'm going to be reading from White Death by Tom Fulner, and I think that it's so important, particularly in this day and age, to acknowledge the darker parts of spaces and to understand that to be able to truly love a place is to acknowledge the things that are beneath the surface. This is one of our scarier selections, so I thought I should include something rather spooky. White secrets, like the ones our daddy never told us, whisper of a wave of immigrants from Asia in the 1880s. They came to work on the railroad, first laying tracks in the mountains, then laying roots along the Spokane River. Invisible hands that built this city, white folks needed the cheap labor, but didn't want foreigners settling down roots. A story as old as time. The big shots took credit for the labor, and with their fortunes, they visited the same gambling halls and prostitution cribs that were condemned at church on Sunday. They found a new White Death at the dead of night, down in a den at the end of Japanese Alley. You guessed it, opium. The decent church-going folks struck back hard on all that sinning, and by the 1940s, the immigrant population was thinned to nothing. All that remained of the Chinatown alleys was demolished in construction for the 1974 World's Fair. History is remarkably easy to pave over. In 1987, 3 skeletons were unearthed while constructing a new condominium in Brown's Addition. They were identified as indigenous. Evidently, the whole neighborhood is on an ancient burial ground, ghost on top of ghost on top of ghost. The White Devil himself, Spokane serial killer Robert Lee Yates, carried the torch of White Death from the mid-70s into the new millennium. His kids went to Lewis and Clark High School with my son. They were quiet nobodies until the cops raided their house at 49th and Crestline near the South Hill Sports Complex. Yates buried one woman outside his bedroom window while his wife was sleeping a few feet away. The ghosts of those he killed still scream in the wind from East Sprague up to Hangman Valley. He wasn't the last serial killer in Spokane. He was just the last one to get caught. Good ones don't get caught until they want to, until they decide their ride is over. There's no telling how many maniacs prowl the streets tonight. Never walk alone. Check your shit for worms. If you hear whispers in the wind, run. 3 murders from last month are connected, some detective on TV says. This new guy kills in ways that mirror Spokane's past. One victim buried alive in a Brown's Addition construction site, the word Guilo carved into him. One victim drowned in the Latah Creek that has not been found yet. Retribution, continuation, ain't my place to say. White Death cares for justice nor revenge, just keeps coming, swallowing up what don't belong and what dies. This new White Death keeps Spokane's violent tradition alive, but he's not a copycat. He's creative, and the city will remember him, just like she remembers all of her killers. He won't stop until every last one of us joins Spokane's endless chorus of the dead. That's how I know I, ain't done yet.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to shift the tone a little bit. That always gets me at the end. I'm going to read from Ashley Worsbacher's Squatchette. A little context for you before I dive in. Think about the question of what happens if your partner, the love of your life, suddenly starts to believe in Bigfoot in a very serious way. And how do you navigate that? So here we go. In June, Rebecca invites two Bigfoot field investigators to the house. One is a retired aerospace engineer who claims to have had his first face-to-face encounter on the Olympic Peninsula 2 years ago, and the other is a retired paramedic who tells you that a family of six Sasquatch, reside in the woods behind his cabin in Aberdeen. They like to watch him play chess on the deck with his son, who is mute but attuned to Sasquatch howls and tree knocks, to which he responds with answering raps and taps on the deck posts. When they watch him, the retired paramedic says he can feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Do you have a photo, you ask? He gives you a wry smile and then addresses Rebecca. They always ask for a photo, he says. But he produces his phone from his pocket and taps open a photo in which a dark smudge, arguably ape-shaped, hovers among foliage, bisected by a tree trunk. You take the phone and zoom in to study the smudge. It's out of focus. They aren't easy to photograph. I pissed myself the first time I saw one, Rebecca reminds you. You're shaking, you're overwhelmed, you can't get a clear picture. You've never heard her say pissed in this context, and the word sounds strange in her voice. Even beyond that, the retired paramedic adds, the energy fields interfere with photography. Each individual Sasquatch has its own energy signal. You didn't expect to hear this man in a camel ball cap talk about energy signatures. You aren't sure what an energy signature is, and you aren't sure he's sure either. You imagine a giant ape signing its name in the air in quicksilver squiggle with a wave of a finger. Things can start getting less weird any minute now. You suggest that this narrow peninsula is a subprime place for monsters. 2 roads run parallel between the ocean on the west and the bay on the east, and you can walk from one side to the other in half an hour. There are oyster farms, cranberry bogs, and on the Pacific side, clusters of vacation homes and wide open beaches where trucks drive over the sand and dogs chase seagulls. This is not our first report of activity in this area, says the retired paramedic, who starts telling you about the accidents caused by motorist Sasquatch sightings. These people are telling you what they saw. They're giving descriptions that match the descriptions of other Sasquatch knowers to a T. And do you think that information gets included in the accident reports? I'm guessing not, you say. Those sightings have been 100% covered up by the authorities. The retired engineer pokes at some sticks at the base of a bush with the toe of his boot. Miss Hogan, he says to Rebecca, did you place these objects here? Rebecca comes over to look at an assortment of sticks and stones on the ground. No, she says. You think it could be a glyph? Could be. Have you seen things like this before? Sticks and stones, you ask? I don't think so, Rebecca says, ignoring you. I guess I haven't looked. The retired paramedic nods. Funny what you see once you start looking for it, huh? The 4 of you wander through the woods, searching for X structures or bent arches, neither of which you find. Rebecca retells the story of her encounter, and the retired paramedic records her, cutting her off once in a while to ask questions. You see nothing in the woods that you haven't seen 100 times before. You hike closer to traffic until its noise grows loud, and you can make out the cars passing on Sandridge Road through the trees. The retired engineer stops in his tracks. You smell that? You do. It stinks. Rebecca says, that might be what I smelled. A few yards on, he stops before a pile of what appears to be explosive diarrhea, a patty half baked in the spotty sunlight. The retired paramedic crouches, sniffs, and snaps a perfectly in focus picture. That don't look like bear, he says. And that's the end of that section.
I want to believe. Well, thank you all for listening as we got to share a little bit about the journey of our press, what brought us together, and where we're headed in the future. We had such an incredible time producing this collection and are so very grateful for our authors and contributors and all the amazing people we built or we met along the way building our community. So thank you so much.
And thank
Awesome.
you so much to Kate and Mackenzie for having us here.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Aimee. Thanks, Katy and Morgan. That was just really such a great way to get to know the anthology and how you all made the choices that you did to make it such an evocative representation of our region. I especially loved all your different perspectives and how they came into play. I'm also an East Coast transplant who's been in Spokane for almost 15 years now, surprisingly. So I love to keep thinking about how impactful place is on creative work and how you can actually get a sense of how it feels to live in a place just through the storytelling. I'm sure this whole conversation is going to be really useful for anyone who's interested in putting together an anthology with such a strong vision and theme like Campfire Stories has. And thank you also for sharing some selections from the book. One of our goals with presenting this virtually, I know most of you are still here in Spokane. We're glad that we could do this virtually to have your perspective too, Morgan. But we wanted to make sure that we were showing off the local fiction community here and what makes the Northwest such a special place. And you all did a really beautiful job helping us do that. So thank you again. And thank you for the sneak peek also into your new project. That sounds really, really cool. So I can't wait for that. Thanks also to Mackenzie, GetLit's assistant coordinator, for all of their hard work today and behind the scenes leading up to this event. Thanks also to student assistant Adam Westerholm and all of our MFA interns who helped make the festival possible. To everyone watching at home, I hope that you'll join us for more festival events, both in person and here on Zoom. I also want to remind everyone at home that we do have links embedded in all of our event descriptions that will lead you directly to our local indie bookstore, Auntie's, where you can purchase the Campfire Anthology. Thanks to Auntie's for being our official festival bookseller. Please visit our website, getlitfestival.org, for our full schedule and more information about all of our authors, including today's editors. Thank you all again for joining us today. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thank you.